Good morning, everybody. Today's Friday, May 22nd, 2020. This is what I think the third installment of our weekly PPP update webinar. I'm going to give it a couple minutes to let everybody arrive. I'm going to put a poll up here. We're attempting to get a feel for when people receive the PPP loan proceeds, so we can gauge when the 8-week period is going to be up and be ready for questions related to the forgiveness application that we're going to go over here in a little bit, and kind of gauge how that's going to play out. Morning, Shannon, Diane, Carol, George, Becky, Pat, John, Dave. Give it just another minute or so to fill out. I'm going to put this, hopefully, somebody send me a chat message and let me know if you can see the poll message, if that popped up. I spent a couple minutes early this morning playing with an audio file I saw posted in one of the professional websites, something about different play. Let me see if I can reset this poll real quick. Proceed, start the poll. Let's try that. Somebody let me know. So on one of our professional websites, somebody was asking for suggestions about a t-shirt related to PPP and all that kind of stuff. And the only thing that I could think of was the song Naughty by Nature, the OPP song. So I put together a clip replacing the audio, and I'll play that for you in just a second. If I can get the poll to show up. Publish. There's another step. How about that? There we go. So now the poll's showing up. We've got audio, we've got a little video of myself. So here's edited, if it'll play. There we go. So PPP, it's the word, it's the phrase of the past month anyway. So let's see, we've got a decent sized group here. It's 10:30. Looks like poll question is still coming in. I'll let that play out. It's possible for me to bring in somebody to ask questions. So if you have a question, you can put it in the chat box. If you want to come on, if you happen to have audio and or video is not required, you can click the speak button in the lower part of the right-hand side, and it'll pop up and let me know if somebody wants to speak. And I'd be happy to bring you in, and maybe we can get your question answered directly. So I'm going to get this on the chat. Got the chat. Go ahead and keep answering the poll question, and I'm going to go ahead and get started with this week's session. There's some things that I want to go over again from last week. Oh, let's try that again. Killed my screen share here. Let's try that again. Okay. That's better. So recap from last week. I want to remind everybody that we don't really have a whole lot of information about the stimulus checks. It's unfortunate that the IRS website isn't terribly helpful in a lot of cases, and it seems like people are entering the right information, but they're getting incomplete results or not information not available from the IRS website. And we just don't have any way to confirm or see what data they're pulling from or anything like that. So assuming your 2018 return was filed and you're eligible, then you should get the stimulus check. If your 2019 return was filed, then and you're eligible, you should get the stimulus check. If for some reason you are eligible for the stimulus payment and you don't get a check and you don't get the direct deposit, we will include the tax credit on your 2020 tax return. It's not a get it or don't get it or lose it kind of thing. It's actually a prepayment of a 2020 tax credit. So you will get it if you're eligible for it when we do your 2020 tax return. The other thing that I mentioned last week that popped up on my radar when a client posted something to LinkedIn that indicated that it's quite a windfall that people get the unemployment checks and it's not taxable. But as I said, I almost sent something to him in the public forum, but he decided not to and sent it to him outside of it. Unemployment benefits are certainly taxable, and they always have been. If your employees, anybody that you've furloughed that's coming back, you might want to, or you have communication with them, you might want to let them know that unemployment benefits are taxable, and they will get a 1099 from the state of Ohio reflecting how much they've received, and it'll need to be included on their 1040 for 2020. So it's and they don't generally withhold any tax from those payments. So all the tax is going to be due when they file their tax return. Turn my heater down here. So let's talk about some things that happened between last week and this week. So last Friday, we were anticipating the PPP forgiveness application being released sometime in the near future. Well, it happened to be released late in the afternoon last Friday. We've started to review it and made some headway with it, and that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. Let's see if there are any questions yet. Again, if you have questions, go ahead and put in the chat or click the Speak Now button, and I'd be happy to bring you into the conversation. So the first thing we want to remind people to do is to relax. Even though the application is available, it doesn't mean we have to run right out and complete it and send it into the bank. Once the bank receives it, they have 60 days to make a determination of whether or not or how much the loan is going to be forgiven. The loan itself is deferred for 6 months. So your first payment on the PPP loan won't be due for 6 months from the time you got it. So I just want to calm everybody down and just take some time to let this thing percolate a little bit, especially with all of the things that are still in flux. I really want to recommend that you not be the first in line at the bank looking to submit your PPP application for forgiveness. One, it's going to be a big rush. Two, as we saw with the application process, there may be hiccups that cause delays, and we don't want you to get frustrated with that. We don't want you to get frustrated with us trying to put together the information if you have us do that. So it's not something that you need to you don't need to get it there day one after the 8-week period. The application as it stands right now most likely is not the final version. There are several things we're waiting on. The other thing is that your bank may have their own PPP application, forgiveness application anyway. So filling out the application that's available online may not be efficient. So let's just wait and see what your particular bank requires. Things we haven't had Congress weigh in on yet. They're trapped in various bills or a bill. One was comments that were made about the SBA's restrictions on on how the money could be spent. 75% had to be on payroll. No more than 25% could be on other eligible expenses. The thing is, those were SBA restrictions. Those were not in the actual law. There's talk that the 8-week period could be extended. And the other one, the big one, was that whether the expenses paid or forgiven as a part of the PPP forgiveness process would be allowed as deductions on the business tax return. That's probably one of the more significant issues. It would be out of character for that to be allowed. The IRS has said that they're not allowed if the loan is forgiven. Congress said that wasn't the intent, but the IRS is just following the law. Congress needs to get with the program and get moving if they intend for business owners to be able to deduct the expenses that they pay with the forgiven loan proceeds. We're working out engagement details, what it's going to look like for us to have you, what it's going to look like for you to have us prepare the information, gather the information for an application that you can submit to your bank. There are things that are not going to be readily available that are on the application. The one that comes to mind is the calculation for full-time equivalent employees. Most payroll software does not include a report that does that calculation. The probability is that it's going to have to be done manually. That's something you're welcome to obviously take on, but I'm looking at it as being part of the engagement that we will be doing for you. I don't anticipate us working on PPP forgiveness applications until the last week of July. The first set of loans that were funded will probably result in their 8-week period ending late June. And then we have the first individual tax filing deadline of July 15th. And I'm sure we're going to get an influx of activity right around July 1st, late June. So it's going to keep us busy for a little while. More than likely, we won't get to PPP application work and those engagements until at least the last week of July. Some suggestions that have come up that are a little contrary to what we talked about in earlier sessions, especially for sole proprietors and S Corp owners. For some of our clients that are S Corps, we run payroll and the entire net pay offsets distributions that the business owner took. In other words, they don't get any net paycheck. For this 8-week period, we're suggesting that the business owner actually get a net paycheck, and then if necessary, deposit it right back in the bank, right back into the business checking account. It has the same effect. It just creates a paper trail of a net paycheck clearing the bank that's going to be easier for a banker to trace and confirm that the owner's salary is actually occurring. The other is for sole proprietors and partnerships. The forgiveness for sole proprietors and partnerships is limited to 8 50-seconds of their net self-employment income, but we're hearing that bankers are going to want to see checks being written to the sole proprietor and or the business or the partners. And again, it's creating the paper trail that they can follow. So it's relatively easy to determine what the 8 50-seconds is. Whatever that amount is, you may want to start writing a check once a week for that amount from your business checking account. If necessary, if you need the cash in the business, just deposit that check right back in the business checking account. I already mentioned the calculation of full-time equivalency. The other thing that the application points out or allows for is that the 8-week period isn't a strict time period. In other words, what they said is that if the 8-week period can start on the first day of the pay period that starts after the receipt of the loan money. So if you receive the money on a Thursday or Friday and your pay period starts on Saturday or Sunday, your 8-week period could start on that Saturday or Sunday. That gives us some planning flexibility also. The other thing that it made clear is that the expenses are expenses that have been paid and or incurred during the 8-week period. So it gives you some flexibility, again, on the 8-week period. An expense that you've incurred during the 8-week period, let's say a cell phone bill, for example, you may not receive the bill for that until, or the due date for that bill may not be until after the 8-week period. The portion of the expense that was incurred during the 8-week period can be included on your application for forgiveness. Now, again, there's some calculation that's going to be involved there. So you might be collecting those invoices. You might collect, if your 8-week period ends, let's say May 31st, you may not get your cell phone bill, or it may not be due until June 10th. The part of the cell phone bill that represents the time period that ended in May can be included in the application, as long as the bill is paid by the due date. So it's not as strict as we initially thought from an 8-week period time standpoint. So let's look at some of the things on the application itself. So we have an application that's 11 pages long. It's a bit of a monster. I'm going to send a link to you through the chat box. So the link should show up. I don't know if it comes through as a hyperlink or not, but you can copy that link and paste it in a browser, and you'll be taken right to the application. So go back here. So as I said, you have some flexibility in the 8-week time frame. The compensation is limited to a maximum of $15,835 per employee for the 8-week period, which comes out to $1,923 per week. That corresponds to the $100,000 limitation on wages. The thing that stood out to a lot of us is that the application says not to include payroll costs related to employee benefits for the owner. Now, we know that health insurance can be included, or was included on the application for the PPP, but curiously, the forgiveness application says to exclude owner benefits. It's one of the things we expect some changes on the application and how they allow for those. The calculation for the full-time equivalency reduction is included on the application. The average full-time equivalent base is based on 40 hours, not 30 hours. I think last week and maybe in previous weeks I said it's probably going to be 30 hours because generally in an SBA loan situation it's based on 30 hours, but the application is specific to 40. I don't think that's going to change. They also give us a simplified method where if we know the employee works an average of 40 hours, we can use one for that employee. If they work less than 40 hours on average, we just use half a person. And then and your part-time people added together would be added to at a half a person per part-time person to arrive at the number of full-time equivalency that you have. There's the full-time equivalency safe harbor, which is returning workers to the payroll by June 30th. So if you laid people off, but bring them back by June 30th, bring them back to levels that you had as of February 15th, then your full-time equivalency won't change. So in other words, if you're looking at a workforce reduction between February 15th and April 26th, if you laid people off, whatever it may have been, as long as you bring back the levels to the same as they were in that time period by June 30th, your full-time equivalency won't be reduced. If you have someone who you laid off and requested that they come back to work, make sure you have documentation related to that, because it will not affect your full-time equivalency calculation. So if, for example, you laid someone off, they started to draw unemployment benefits, the federal unemployment benefit kicked in, and maybe they have better cash flow now than they had while they were working. So when you offered for them to come back to work, they declined. You would not include them in either the numerator or the denominator of the calculation for full-time equivalency, but document it. Make sure you have something that reflects when you made the offer, when you got the response, preferably in writing, but have that for your records. The wage-based reduction has to do with whether you've reduced employee wages more than 25% during the covered period, January 1st to March 31st. The safe harbor, if wages are increased, kind of the same as the full FTE calculation, as long as your wages are increased back to the levels they were as of February 15th, then you will not face a reduction in the forgiveness calculation. If you reduce wages by 25% or more, the percent of the reduction reduces your PPP forgiveness. If you've been consistent and you have not reduced your wages or adjusted wages, then you shouldn't have any problem fitting into the 75% calculation. The economic income disaster loan proceeds, or the grant as it was often called, is included in the PPP application for forgiveness. To the extent that you received an EIDL grant, it will reduce the amount of PPP loan proceeds that can be forgiven. So if your PPP, let's say you received $5,000 in an EIDL grant and your PPP loan comes back at all forgivable, you will still have a loan for the PPP purposes of the $5,000 that you received as the EIDL grant. That's just the way the PPP has been set up. To the extent you received the grant, your PPP is not otherwise forgivable. Little typo there. We're confident that the application is going to change. We're confident that at some point Congress is going to step in and make adjustments for things like the deductibility of the expenses and those sorts of things. Again, it comes back to being patient. Some of these things may not come about until after your 8-week period changes or after your 8-week period expires, which means rushing to the bank to put your application for forgiveness in may cause you to miss out on whatever the change might be. You might have to go through the application process again. As of right now, I don't know if there's an appeal process or what that appeal process looks like. Every bank is probably going to be applying some slight differences in the way that they calculate the forgiveness. And if we disagree with it, hopefully there's a way to resubmit the application and have it reconsidered. We know that on the loan side of it, there were several instances where people either got loans or didn't get loans because of the way the bank interpreted the information. We know of a couple of situations where, for example, an S corporation where wages were not paid at all during 2019, the loan processor used the K-1 from the S corporation to get the loan proceeds. But on an S corporation, the K-1 should not have been considered because it's not income that's subject to self-employment tax. The K-1 looks a lot like a partnership K-1, but they're, from a tax standpoint, they're dramatically different. The K-1 from a partnership, on the other hand, can be used or should have been able to be used for PPP loan application. So there's a lot of differences in how banks are looking at this information. There's a question, not sure if you mentioned this already. Is there an established deadline to submit an application for forgiveness? John, that's a great question. I haven't seen anything specific that says the application must be submitted by this date. My perception, if you will, is that the last point where you want to submit the application is 60 days before your loan starts to be repayable. In other words, you've got 6 months that it's in deferral. The bank has 60 days to decide how much is forgiven. So if your loan is set to start, let's say on December 1st, I think you're going to want to have your application in no later than October 1st, so that you get the bank's blessing before the loan payments begin. But there isn't, I didn't see anything specific in the application that has a drop dead date when it has to be submitted. All right. Some ways we're going to be showing up for clients. We've got the PPP webinars through June 26th every Friday at 10:30. We have a business growth webinar that's going to be on June 23rd. I'm going to put these links in the chat box here. We have the Courage to Rebalance, which has to do with one of the rules of investing that a lot of people forego. And we have Mind Over Money on July 7th. Mind Over Money has to do with the things that occur for people that cause them to make poor investing decisions. We're still working on the Pure Mastermind program. That will be a group program where business owners come together to work together to talk about and solve their issues to create better businesses. So that's the end of my prepared remarks for the PPP. If you have any questions, I'm going to go back a slide. If you have any questions, go ahead and post them. You're welcome, John. If there's anything specific that you've seen come up that's come up in your business, I'm hearing that banks are starting to pressure is not the right word, but encourage business owners to send information, bills, and that kind of stuff to the bank. I would hold off on that. Submit the application all at once. As I said before, there's no report in any payroll software that I'm aware of that does the full-time equivalency calculation for us. If there aren't any other questions, I'll give it just another minute, and then I've got a special slide that I want to talk about for a second. Okay, nothing else is coming through, so I'm going to advance the slide again. So this is Memorial Day weekend. Memorial Day weekend it's not just for the people who served, but it's for the people who didn't make it home. And there's a saying that's something to the effect of all gave some gave all. That's what this holiday is about. All of us have probably known someone who didn't make it home. I'm named after one. Mike McCormick was my dad's cousin. He didn't make it home from Vietnam. We have a client, his son did not make it home, or their son, John and Carol Brzezinski, their son Taylor did not make it home. Matt Maupin, the Yellow Ribbon program is right around the corner from our Mount Carmel office. My friend's stepson, Stephen Conover from Wilmington, didn't make it home. Whomever you know that didn't make it home, thank them. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. And know that we do live in a great country because of these people. We'll see you next Friday. Have a great weekend. Be safe. The restrictions are starting to be lifted, so hopefully we can get together and have some fun. Happy Memorial Day. Take care.